tariffs don't punish foreign companies, they don't punish foreign governments, they punish American consumers and producers. Policy uncertainty is distorting supply chains, increasing costs, and weakening confidence across the economy. If we want people to prosper, we need a government that steps back, allows individuals in the free market to take the lead. Hello, welcome to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. It's always a pleasure to have you here. We got a lot to talk about today, so I really just want to jump right into it, but I did want to say thank you for joining me. Let's get to it, all right? So tariffs are a misguided way to raise revenue, period. But we hear so many things that it's not. So I really wanted to dive into that more. I've talked a lot about trade. I've talked a lot about tariffs and taxes over time. But of course, the major burden on people that are out there is, from government anyway, right, is on their spending. And one of the things that we could do with tariffs, and you hear talk about bringing people to a negotiating table, trying to close trade deficits, helping out with hollowing out of the middle, the Rust Belt, which I think all of these are kind of misguided attempts to solve what the real problem is of too much government in our lives already. We need more liberty. We need more freedom, not more control, which is exactly what tariffs are. It's trade protectionism. Right? It's protecting something, which means the voluntary transactions that are happening throughout the economy can't happen. And so while I'm empathetic with those who are more trade protectionists, if you will, or more on the line of Pat Buchanan and some others that are out there, even Alexander Hamilton going way back, and thinking that trade is or protectionism is a path forward, especially with tariffs, I also want to say that we're not in that situation anymore. We're more in a modern economy where you should think about voluntary transactions across the political spectrum, across the economy, to where individuals can truly prosper. So if you're getting stuck in this idea that it's a win-loss sort of situation, you're really losing out on what free markets is really about and voluntary transactions are really about, because it's not just across different towns or across different states or even across countries. It's really about the people making voluntary transactions, allowing them to improve their lot in life. So what I want to do is talk about this, okay? As of this recording, the Supreme Court has an opportunity to set an important precedent whereby the president cannot impose taxes by executive order. If this court affirms this ruling, which I think that they will, it will be a win for constitutional order and taxpayers alike. But this moment, it doesn't appear out of nowhere. It didn't appear out of nowhere, guys. For decades, Congress has steadily handed its trade and tax authority, which is what they have, the power of the purse, to the executive branch, granting presidents of both parties broad tariff powers with little oversight. What began, really, when you think about all this, as narrow tools, has evolved into something much more, giving sweeping authority to manage the economy, wage trade wars, and pressure allies. Administrations have leaned on tariffs as a fix for real concerns. And every time, Americans have paid the price. So I'm going to talk about this. We're going to break down how we got here, why tariffs create more problems than they solve, and the constitutional, economic, and strategy policy reforms that would actually help American workers, businesses, and families instead of hurting them. You can catch the full episode, remember, on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, and visit my website, vanceginn.com, or my Substack newsletter, vanceginn.substack.com, for much more information. So how do we get there? Well, tariffs have a long history of backfiring on Americans. In 1930, the Smoot-Hawley tariff was proposed as a means to protect U.S. industries, in particular U.S. farmers. Instead, it triggered a global trade war that worsened, if not caused, the onset of the Great Depression. Congress later gave presidents tariff authority through the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 and the Trade Act of 1974. But the purpose of those weren't to launch trade wars. These laws were intended to lower trade barriers and address genuine national security concerns, not to raise hidden taxes on Americans. In 2018-19, President Trump imposed tariffs on China to shrink the trade deficit with China. The result was higher prices for consumers, higher costs for manufacturers, and retaliatory tariffs by other countries, hurting farmers and others. And it didn't really do anything to the trade deficit, which is economically, with the way that I have been explaining it for years, if not decades now, but it's something that I think people see on the surface that may seem like it could work. President Biden criticized those tariffs whenever he wasn't president, but then he kept them all, basically all of them, from the first Trump administration, extending the economic harm. Now, Trump, just like Biden before him, is again promoting tariffs as a way to protect American jobs. However, history shows that they usually destroy more jobs than they support. We're already seeing the drag. Trump entered office promising growth, but unlike his first term, he started with tariffs instead of tax and regulatory reforms, which I think he should have started with those first. And tariffs are a tax on American production and consumption. So it's really just balancing out or negating the positive effects of what those other things like the One Big Beautiful Bill and the deregulation, what those would provide. The good news, it's not too late to change course. By embracing free trade, fiscal responsibility, and proven pro-growth reforms like sustainable budgeting, the administration can help the economy recover and enable people to prosper. So let's break down the harms of tariffs and the solutions to support American workers, businesses, and families. Number one, we need to get this in our mind that tariffs are taxes. No matter what the administration or other people say, they are taxes. They're not a regulatory cost. They're not something else that's out there. They are a tax. In fact, the United States, the federal government has collected hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes, tariffs, collections just this year. And so if it wasn't a tax, why are we getting this excess revenue coming in? And why is the administration saying we're going to get $2.5 to $3 trillion more dollars over a decade from this tariff, which would not replace the income tax? It's a small portion of what the income tax is coming in, which I want to get rid of the income tax, by the way. I would do that through sustainable budgeting, right? Spending less and pushing us closer to a consumption tax. I think that would be a better direction, not one just on imports. I think that's also some confusion, is that some people think tariffs are a consumption tax, but it's only on a small portion of our economy. It's only on a few people who import those. And you got to remember, about half of all the imports are actually raw materials or some sort of materials that goes in the production process. So it hurts businesses, which means the workers and the shareholders in the process. Tariffs are often sold as tools to protect American jobs, but in practice, tariffs are taxes on imports, and those taxes fall on American families, workers, and businesses. About half of U.S. imports are intermediate goods, as I just mentioned, where you look at raw materials, components, and machinery that American producers need to make things here at home. When tariffs raise the cost of those inputs, the higher prices ripple throughout the supply chain, leading to more expensive goods, fewer jobs created, slower wage growth, and lower investment. Trade is mutually beneficial, guys. If trade didn't benefit both sides of that exchange, people wouldn't do it. Whether across town or across borders, voluntary exchange occurs because each party values what the other offers more than what they are already possessing, right? It only makes sense. You only act with that trade if you benefit. Your marginal benefit are greater than your marginal cost. It's not indifferent. You also hear about this in economics, especially in grad school, is that, well, there's an indifference here to where it can be greater than or equal to. But if your marginal benefit are equal to your marginal cost, you would not act. You would not transact. You would just keep what you have. And that's why it has to be greater than. That additional benefit you're getting from that consumption of whatever it is greater than the cost of something that you're giving up. Got to make sure that we understand that, even if it's currency, okay? This isn't exploitation, it's cooperation. Trade enables people and businesses to specialize, boost productivity, and focus on their areas of expertise. The result is more abundance, not less. Tariffs are paid directly and indirectly in some cases by Americans, not by foreign governments. Producers face higher input costs and consumers face higher prices on everyday goods. With families already squeezed by inflation, the last thing they need is another tax disguised as quote-unquote economic protection. We need pro-growth policies, not more taxes. Instead of punishing consumers and businesses with higher prices, we should focus on policies that promote innovation, reduce regulatory burdens, and keep costs low. If the goal is to strengthen U.S. manufacturing, the answer is fiscal discipline and pro-growth reforms, not import taxes that disrupt supply chains and slow economic growth. Free trade and open markets are what help people and economies, which are just people, to prosper. which is my calling, let people prosper. Related to this, to better understand how tariffs act as taxes on consumers, watch my panel discussion with Dr. Pete Earle on NTD News. I put that in the show notes page. Number 2, tariffs cause uncertainty. Tariff policies fuel uncertainty, raise prices, and stoke inflation, especially in areas that have a tax on it. When businesses don't know which tariffs will be imposed or how long they'll last, they hesitate to hire, invest, or launch new projects. And that's what I'm hearing a lot across the United States from businesses right now, is that they have too much uncertainty in the economy, and they're looking for this to be drawn out and come to a finality with what's happening in trade protectionism and tariffs, because otherwise they don't know what their cost is going to be. They don't know what their supply chain is going to be. And that has put a really halt on the overall economic activity that's going on. This kind of unpredictability then makes long-term planning nearly impossible, slowing economic activity and undermining job creation. Look, uncertainty comes at a cost. The uncertainty created by tariffs is already dragging down economic momentum. Businesses, investors, and even consumers are recalibrating plans because they can't predict the future cost. You can't plan for growth when policy keeps shifting underneath you one way or the other. Who really is hurt by these tariffs is that tariffs don't punish foreign companies. They don't punish foreign governments. They punish American consumers and producers. Policy uncertainty is distorting supply chains, increasing costs, and weakening confidence across the economy. If we want people to prosper, we need a government that steps back, allows individuals in the free market to take the lead. More jobs is fewer tariffs. This year's weak labor market growth tells us a clear story. Job creation is stagnant, unemployment is rising, and uncertainty is hindering investment. We won't fix that by printing more money. We fix it by reducing government spending, ending distortive policies like tariffs, and freeing entrepreneurs and workers to create value. That's what gives businesses the confidence to invest, expand, and hire. Related to this, I break down current labor market trends and how tariffs affect jobs and entrepreneurs in my piece, America's Jobs Mirage, Weak Growth, Fewer Workers, and the Wrong Kind of Healthcare Hiring in my recent Substack newsletter. Number 3, businesses ask favors to avoid pain. Tariffs open the door to more corporate welfare, which you should go and check out my recent Econ 101 about that. When the government starts picking winners and losers, businesses inevitably adapt to the game. Companies squeezed by higher input costs, retaliatory tariffs, or other trade barriers face tough decisions. And like with any other tax, many end up lobbying for exemptions to soften the blow. Tariffs don't level the playing field, guys. They distort it. Or you have to give farmers subsidies to bail them out. It's ridiculous. A bad fix is what we're really seeing here, and it doesn't stop at exemptions. Some industries are now receiving bailouts to offset the harms that tariffs created. Recently, the federal government announced it would provide subsidies to farmers and purchase 417,000 metric tons of corn and sorghum for international food aid. But the real question is, why do farmers need rescuing in the first place? Washington is trying to fix the damage it caused, patching over tariff-driven problems with more spending instead of addressing the root issue, trade protectionism and big government nonsense. What do businesses actually need then? Well, businesses and entrepreneurs don't want handouts. They want a fair chance to compete. Free markets, not bailouts, drive prosperity. When trade flows freely, with both sides benefiting, then the government interferes and everyone pays, as we're seeing today. Every bailout dollar comes from the productive private economy, robbing tomorrow's innovation to cover today's policy mistakes. So let's clarify the goal. Understanding what the tariffs are intended to address is essential to crafting more effective policy. If the goal is to counter China, we need policies that strengthen U.S. innovation and reduce domestic regulatory burdens, not price hikes on American businesses like tariffs do. If the goal is to revive manufacturing, we need tax and regulatory reforms and relief, not costly import taxes that hurt producers and consumers. If the goal is to boost the economy, we need more free trade, not government-imposed barriers that punish consumers and businesses. Related to this, I break down the farmer bailout and better solutions in my piece. Farmers don't need Trump bailouts. They need free markets, right? That's exactly what they need. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on there. And we should also be looking at selling disputes with trade deals. Trade isn't a weapon, it's a bridge to greater opportunity, innovation, and peace. When nations trade freely, costs fall, choices expand, and economies grow. History also shows that countries that trade with one another are less likely to enter conflict. Tariff wars do the opposite. They make us poorer, strain alliances, and isolate the United States from global partnerships that promote stability. With all this being going on, we just need more trade deals and not tariffs. Trade disputes are real and deserve a serious response. But punishing Americans and our allies with tariffs isn't a solution. The U.S. should lead by expanding free trade, not restricting it. There are far better tools than tariffs for countering bad actors like China. Agreements such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was with 12 countries, many of those in the Asian Pacific area, would have strengthened U.S. influence in Asia and set higher standards for global commerce. By walking away from that, the United States, especially Trump, we gave China more room to shape the region's trade rules and the future. So what's the path forward? It's time to reverse course. New trade agreements built on lowering trade barriers can reinforce American leadership, strengthen democratic alliances, and raise incomes at home and abroad. Related to this, I explain why trade deals, not tariffs, are the path forward in my piece from this spring. Trump's trade wars fuel economic uncertainty amid recession fears. What about Congress? We need to restore Congress's role. Presidents of both parties have overreached, treating emergency powers and trade statutes like blank checks where they can do anything they want. But tariffs are taxes, and under the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, the power to tax belongs to Congress, not the president. The framers placed the power of the purse in Congress for a reason: to ensure accountability, restraint, and deliberation when Americans' livelihoods are on the line. Congress is meant to safeguard liberty by doing less, not rubber stamping executive overreach like it's often doing today. So who's responsible? When courts have to remind a president that he cannot unilaterally tax Americans, imagine that, it reveals just how far we've drifted from our constitutional design. Trade policy is not a presidential hobby horse. It is a Congress's constitutional responsibility. So why did Congress give away its power? Well, for decades, Congress has been willing to hand off this responsibility and a lot more to the executive branch, allowing presidents to play trade warrior while lawmakers dodge tough votes. This dereliction of duty has contributed to a larger, less accountable federal government, record spending, and the instability we see in today's economy. The path forward should otherwise include lawmakers as reasserting their Article 1 authority by tightening statutes like IEPA, closing loopholes that invite abuse, and taking direct responsibility for America's trade and tax and spending policy. And if Congress truly wants to help workers and families, it should cut spending, simplify and reduce taxes, and end corporate welfare and subsidies, including all tariff and trade barriers. That is the constitutional and pro-growth path forward. Related to this, I explain why trade authority properly belongs to Congress in my recent Substack piece called SCOTUS Hearing Today, The Real Trade Threat is Keeping of Trump's Tariffs. Don't miss that one. So finally, we need to support free trade. If we want an economy that works for people, not politicians, we must let markets do what they do best. Trade allows workers and businesses to specialize, boost productivity, raise incomes, and build wealth. It's not a threat to American prosperity. It's one of the pillars. The proper role of government is not to control trade and voluntary exchanges, but to protect the freedom to trade so we can all benefit and be better off over time. Let the people decide. Americans prosper when they are free to decide how to spend, invest, and produce. But when the government uses tariffs to pick winners and losers, it distorts choices, limits competition, and reduces prosperity. That's not putting America first. It's putting politics before people. We got to forget about trade deficits. Trade deficits are not a scoreboard of winning and losing. Trade is a voluntary exchange where both sides benefit or the trade wouldn't happen. The goal shouldn't be shrinking deficits. It should be expanding freedom by making trade more open and less restricted and having more opportunity for prosperity. So what's the proper role of government here? Well, there is a legitimate government role in international trade, but it's about protecting property rights and enforcing contracts, not imposing tariffs, import quotas, or regulatory mandates on trading partners. A focus on enforcement and the rule of law strengthens markets, allowing nations to negotiate genuine free trade agreements that remove barriers, increase competition, and raise incomes. Related to this, check out my explainer episode on how free trade expands economic freedom. It's called Econ 101, Free Trade Equals More Freedom. So in conclusion today, tariffs don't make America stronger. They make life more expensive, businesses more uncertain, and government more powerful. We've seen it time and again throughout history, and we're seeing it again today. When presidents treat trade policy like a political weapon, the costs fall on the very people they claim to protect: families, workers, farmers, and entrepreneurs. Free trade is a proven engine of prosperity. It lowers prices, expands choices, raises income, and strengthens America's role in the world. It gives businesses the certainty they need to invest, innovate, and hire, and it protects consumers from the hidden taxes imposed by tariffs. We also need the government that is bringing about these overall things and puts limits in place. Congress, not the president, has the constitutional duty and the authority to make trade and tax policy. Congress must restore its Article 1 authority, and trade disputes must be settled with better tools such as trade agreements. All these things come together. America grows strongest when the government gets out of the way and lets people create, build, and pursue their dreams. That's how we spark innovation. That's how we expand opportunity. And that's how we let people prosper. I put a number of related podcast episodes in the show notes that you can find on vanceginn.substack.com. Be sure to check those out. Thanks for joining me in this episode of This Week's Economy. For more insights, visit vanceginn.com and get even greater value with a paid subscription that funds my work to my Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com. So with all that today, thank you for joining me. God bless you. Until next time, let people prosper.